We are all born with the desire to be understood, to be valued, to be seen for who we truly are. But in a world where every interaction is shaped by unseen forces, there exists a darker truth. We are constantly vulnerable to manipulation. It is a subtle, often invisible force, one that plays on our deepest desires, our insecurities, and our need for validation. Manipulators don't need to wield brute force. They don't need to raise their voice or even be overt in their actions. All they need is an intimate understanding of the human psyche and the ability to exploit its weaknesses. The truth is, manipulation does not always come in the form of glaring lies or obvious deceit. Sometimes it is disguised as affection, concern, or even love. And it is this clever camouflage that makes it so insidious. To fall victim to manipulation is not necessarily a sign of weakness, but of a psychological design, a dance between predator and prey where the prey is often unaware they are caught until it is too late. And perhaps, more unsettling still, we all possess the potential to fall prey to this subtle art. In exploring the psychology of manipulation, it's essential to recognize that manipulation is not some arbitrary, chaotic act. It is methodical. It's a calculated process that exploits certain vulnerabilities within the human mind, often without the victim even realizing they are being controlled. The manipulator understands, in a way that many of us don't, the intricate web of human psychology, the fears, insecurities, and desires that often lie beneath the surface of our conscious thoughts. One of the key elements manipulators use is psychological leverage. Human beings, by nature, are deeply social creatures. We crave connection, approval, and acceptance. And it is within these very desires that manipulators find fertile ground to plant their seeds of influence. They understand, for example, that we are wired to avoid conflict, that we fear rejection, and that our self-worth is often, at least partially, tied to the approval of others. These are not weaknesses in themselves. They are simply facets of our humanity, but manipulators take advantage of them. Consider the concept of emotional dependency. As philosopher Jean-Paul Sartre noted in his existential works, we often construct our identities through our relationships with others. Our self-esteem can become dependent on external validation, a fact that makes us ripe for manipulation. When we begin to rely on others to define our worth, we become vulnerable. A manipulator might use this very dependency to their advantage, subtly reinforcing the idea that we are not whole without their approval or presence. This is where manipulation takes root. The manipulator creates a sense of need within us, making us believe that we cannot function or succeed without them. The manipulator may also exploit our desire for emotional security. The famed psychologist Abraham Maslow emphasized the hierarchy of needs, where safety and love form the foundation of self-actualization. If someone can create the illusion of providing these essential needs, we are more likely to overlook their true motives. A manipulator doesn't necessarily need to directly harm us. Instead, they may offer just enough affection, just enough attention, to make us believe that we are safer, more secure, and more loved than we might be without them. This illusion of safety can cloud our judgment, blurring the lines between genuine love and manipulation. It is here, within the nuances of affection and attention, that the manipulator's most subtle moves unfold. They may gaslight us, causing us to question our reality, our memories, or our perceptions. Gaslighting, a term popularized by the 1944 film Gaslight, involves a manipulator slowly wearing down the victim's confidence in their own thoughts and feelings. Over time, the manipulator makes the victim doubt their own sanity, making it more difficult for the victim to recognize when they are being controlled. By undermining the victim's sense of reality, the manipulator keeps them disoriented and therefore easier to control. As we delve deeper into this, the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche offers profound insight into why we often fall prey to these manipulative forces. Nietzsche spoke of the will to power, the fundamental drive within every individual to assert and enhance their own strength and influence. However, in a world dominated by manipulative forces, this desire for power can be twisted. Nietzsche warned that the will to power is not always about personal growth or freedom. For some, it is a destructive power, one that uses others to maintain control. The manipulator is a perfect example of this perversion of the will to power. Instead of nurturing personal growth and autonomy, they seek to dominate, to diminish others in order to maintain their own control and influence. Now, to understand the effects of manipulation on our mental health and well-being, we must look beyond the immediate discomfort. While manipulation often begins with small, seemingly harmless gestures, the subtle emotional bait that draws us in, the long-term effects can be profound. It undermines our autonomy, causing us to rely on others for validation and stability, making us feel inadequate or powerless when the manipulator is not around. Over time, the victim of manipulation can begin to feel an overwhelming sense of self-doubt. They lose confidence in their ability to make sound decisions, questioning their own intuition and perceptions. This erosion of self-trust can lead to anxiety and depression. When someone is constantly questioning themselves and the intentions of others, it creates an internal state of unease. The manipulator might shift between warmth and coldness, affection and neglect, further destabilizing the victim's emotional landscape. This instability can lead to emotional exhaustion, as the victim constantly tries to recalibrate their internal compass, unable to trust their instincts. In extreme cases, the victim might begin to isolate themselves from friends and family, driven by a growing belief that they cannot trust anyone. The manipulator, in turn, benefits from this isolation, further tightening their grip. Over time, this can lead to a profound sense of hopelessness. The victim begins to believe that they are incapable of escaping the manipulative cycle, that they are forever bound to the whims of someone who seems to have total control over their emotional well-being. But there is hope, for as with all forms of psychological manipulation, awareness is the first step toward liberation. It is crucial to recognize the manipulative patterns as they unfold. As philosopher Carl Jung taught us, much of our behavior is shaped by unconscious forces, but once we bring these forces into consciousness, we gain the ability to alter them. This is the first step toward reclaiming our autonomy. The key to resisting manipulation lies in developing a deep sense of self-awareness. Recognizing when you are being manipulated requires an honest evaluation of your emotional state. Are you constantly feeling anxious, insecure, or confused after interacting with a particular person? Does this individual seem to push your emotional buttons, creating a cycle of emotional highs and lows? These feelings can be indicators of manipulation. Another vital aspect of protecting oneself from manipulation is to establish boundaries. Boundaries are a form of self-protection, allowing us to preserve our emotional energy and assert our independence. Boundaries are not about cutting people off, but about defining where your needs and emotions begin and end. As we learn to assert these boundaries, we start to build the emotional fortitude necessary to resist manipulation. It is only when we are clear about our own values, needs, and emotions that we can stand firm against those who seek to control us. Furthermore, it is essential to cultivate a support network of trusted individuals. Manipulators often work to isolate their victims, leaving them to rely solely on the manipulator for emotional support. By surrounding ourselves with people who truly care for us, we gain perspective on our relationships and can recognize when something is amiss. This external support helps ground us, reminding us of our worth and the validity of our perceptions. Lastly, engaging in therapy or self-reflection is an invaluable tool in understanding how we can be vulnerable to manipulation. It helps us recognize past traumas or insecurities that may make us susceptible to certain forms of manipulation. Through therapy, we can rebuild our confidence and learn how to trust ourselves again. In the end, to resist manipulation is not about becoming cynical or distrusting of others. Rather, it's about reclaiming our agency. As Nietzsche once said, "He who fights with monsters should be careful lest he thereby become a monster." By understanding the mechanisms of manipulation, we protect ourselves not just from others, but from losing our own sense of self in the process. And in this understanding, we find the true power to assert our autonomy and choose relationships that nurture rather than diminish us. Manipulation, in its many forms, will always exist in the shadows of human interaction. But by acknowledging the psychological forces at play, by becoming conscious of the subtle tactics manipulators employ, we can begin to free ourselves from their grasp. It is a journey toward reclaiming our power, our voice, and our sense of self. Let us walk that path, knowing that the true strength lies not in control over others, but in the mastery over our own minds.